Today, we have as a guest Pastor Ed Treat, who is the executive director of an organization called the Center of Addiction and Faith. His mission is to help the churches better understand and deal with the spiritual battle involved in addiction. Ed has his own story of addiction to both drugs and alcohol, and he shares some fascinating insight on what it took for him to change his personal path of destruction and develop a purpose in helping others in a significant way. I think one of the things that impacted me most in this interview was shared near the end when he conveyed to us one of the greatest lies he believed about God. Let's listen in. Hey, Ed, I am so happy that you have joined us today on Say Goodbye and Imagine. And I'm looking forward to hearing your story because I haven't heard it. I've worked with you on a few different things, given what you're responsible for, but I'm excited about today. So welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm honored to be a guest.
Yeah, I always loved starting with who you are. Like, who are you? What are you doing today? Married, children,
Mhm.
family, where you live, anything about you that people
Yeah.
can understand.
I'm a Lutheran pastor. I've been a pastor for 28 years. I was ordained in 1995. I'm married. I have a wonderful wife who's a pastor, and then I have four beautiful children. They've all gone to Lutheran colleges and have graduated and are off and they're doing their thing in the world. That brings me a lot of joy. And I've recently become a grandfather. I have two lovely grandchildren by my oldest daughter. And so that's been a real gift in my life.
Oh, congratulations for
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you. Yeah. So
And you are the director of something called the Center of Faith
the Center
of
of Addiction
Reform.
and Faith right here.
The Center
The
of
the Center of
Addiction
Addiction and
and
Faith.
Faith. Okay.
Yeah. And so this is a nonprofit. I left the parish about 2 years ago. I was parish pastor. And in 2016, I saw a huge need for the church to do more about the addiction crisis that we were in. And I've watched the church over the years not really do anything with it. And so I just said, this is crazy. Everybody's suffering from this. The whole world is suffering from it. And the church really is a place that ought to be involved. And so that became my crusade and my calling. And so our mission statement, the Center of Addiction and Faith, is to awaken faith communities to address addiction. So we're trying to
Amen.
shape
Amen.
churches,
Yeah.
trying to shape churches to say, you know what, you may not have this problem personally, which, that's questionable, but you may not have this problem personally, but members of your church do, and members of the community do. And unless you start talking about it, we're never going to get through this anyway. So I just feel like churches, faith communities of every kind have a moral obligation to understand what's going on with addiction and how to better respond to it, to do more to help people.
Yeah. Well, the world is filled with uh, a lot of stress, and people are using a variety of coping mechanisms that get them caught in a cycle of addiction.
Right.
And God's word is there to help us through it. But
Yeah.
as you said, I don't think the churches understand how to help. So I'm so grateful that that God has called you to do what you're doing and to give more awareness um, about this and about the suffering. So,
Well,
yeah.
it's the thing about addiction is everybody hears that word and says, "Oh, that's not me.
Mhm.
That's somebody else." And so, what I'm trying to get people to do is say, "Wait a minute, you have addiction. Everybody does. It's part of our human nature." And so, when you say that word addiction, everybody thinks drugs, but addiction is much more than drugs. It's when in my faith tradition, when we begin worship, we most of our churches will say at the very beginning of worship, we begin with a confession, and we say, "God, we are in bondage to sin and cannot free ourselves." And so, what we're saying to God is I keep thinking and saying and doing things that are not good, and I can't seem to stop, and I need your help. That's addiction. And so it may not be drugs. It may be food. It may be work. It may be exercise. It may be
Absolutely.
pornography. It may be relationships. We get attached to things. The Bible calls it idolatry, but we get attached to things that become our ultimate good in life, and they're not serving us. Those things become addictions.
I've developed in my own work um my criterions for, the, what I call repetitive sin or
Yeah.
addiction. And that's anything that takes a significant time, a significant amount of time, talent, and treasure from the kingdom. And anything that is addictive or repetitive sin, you'll notice
Yeah.
all three of those things. It's
Really. Yeah. Yeah. There's one of the gurus about addiction works up in Vancouver, BC, and his name is Gabor Mate. You probably know that name, but he talks about this. He talks about his own addiction. He said he was never addicted to drugs, but he was addicted to classical music. So
wow.
he would go and he would spend way too much money on buying CDs, and he just was always. He tells a story about one time needing to be at an appointment, but he got caught up in a music store buying CDs, and he said it created problems for him, but he kept doing it. So for him, that was his addiction. And so the
Yeah.
point is that we all have these things that we get overly attached to, and they become meaningful to us, and they become our ultimate meaning. And that's the seat for God.
Absolutely. So, most of us who work in this area and understand addiction usually have some form of it
Oh yeah,
in it in our best that we want to share with some people. So, I would love to hear your story
sure,
of addiction.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd be glad. Because when I share this story, I always say this: I'm not the hero of this story. This is a story about my failure and God's success. So it's a story of redemption. But I give God all the glory. Um, so I grew up in a very large Catholic family, 6 boys, 2 girls, and my dad was military, and his career was in the army, and it was what I thought was a normal, healthy family, but it wasn't until later in life that I got into recovery and started working on my issues that I discovered that my family wasn't healthy at all. In fact, it was pretty broken. My dad was a very angry man, and his parenting style was erratic at best. I mean, we never knew what we were going to get in trouble for. We just knew we were going to get in trouble. So we
Mm.
lived with this constant fear hanging over us. And if we did something wrong, the punishment was severe. Dad would make us go get a belt, and he would whip us. And he did that on a regular basis. And so I was always living with fear of punishment. And then the inner relationship with my siblings was also not very healthy. Because we lived in that environment of fear, there was a lot of picking on each other. And so we were very sarcastic with each other, and we made fun of each other. We found fault with each other, but we did it in a way that we thought we were being funny and cute and nice. My mom said, "You have to be nice to each other." So we found nice ways to be mean. And
Mm.
so I was always living under the fear that I was going to be the butt of a joke or be humiliated or laughed at. Since I was number 6 out of 8, I was kind of down the pecking order. So I grew up in this soup of fear and shame and humiliation, and always watching my back and always worried about what was going to happen next. So when I was 12, 13 years old and I got to drink alcohol for the first time in my life, I was ready for it. I mean, I remember drinking that first drink and how it warmed me from the inside out, but it fixed me like nothing had ever done before. It made me feel feelings I'd never felt before. I felt free. I felt joy. I felt happy. I wasn't afraid. And so I believe under every addiction, there is pain being medicated.
Mhm.
Uh, and that's what was working for me. I drank alcohol and it fixed my pain and it fixed it really quickly and it fixed it really well. And so I didn't set out to become an alcoholic, but I know that alcohol worked for me. And if it was around, I wanted to be around it because it just helped me, brought me out of myself and helped me be able to talk to girls and it helped me be able to be not self-conscious. And it just fixed a lot of problems for me.
Well, it does calm the nervous system, you know.
Well,
That's initially why I think that we are attracted to it, because if you're living in a state of anxiety and then you try something that wipes away the anxiety, you're like, "Oh, this must be good." But you didn't have any coping mechanisms for that anxiety except for the alcohol. So,
right.
go ahead.
Well, so yeah, it was self-medication really is what it was. And so I started drinking at that age. I was around it as much as I could. And all the way through high school, I was known as um, my nickname in high school was Woodstock because I had really long hair and I had these glasses that turned dark in the sun. And I wore hippie shirts and I was always stoned. I smoked a lot of pot through high school. Was Went to all the parties. I used whatever drugs showed up in my world. If it was mushrooms, I took those. If it was speed, I took those. If it was LSD, I took those. I took anything that could change how I felt because I did not feel normal and happy in my own body, in my own brain. And so I was just around drugs a lot and graduated high school in 1977. And I was out ready to face the world. I had no idea what I was going to do with myself, but I decided I wanted to live somewhere cool. So I moved to Maui, Hawaii at age 17. And part of my attraction to going to Maui was that the drinking age was 18.
I
So
remember. Yeah.
I could get into the bars. And I thought, I want to live there, not just because of that, but because it was Maui, 17 years old, I'm in Maui and I'm going to the bars at night. And just that was my life. And for 3 years, I lived there and that was one big party. I had some amazing stories to tell about meeting some people while I was there. And there was always some famous person staying at the hotel I worked at. One time I met Elton John on the beach
Wow.
and he was interested in my friend David. Uh, we ended up going to a couple bars with Elton and his entourage. And it took us a while, but we finally figured out that they were trying to sleep with us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was
Well,
that was
back then that wasn't very like open, right?
what?
So you wouldn't have known right away back
Oh, we didn't
then.
know right away. No, we didn't. We didn't suspect anything until they were until some of the gestures were more until there was more obvious requests of us. And then it was kind of funny because we felt like, well, we liked hanging out with Elton John and we liked the free cocaine and the notoriety of being around somebody famous, but are we willing to go to bed for it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Realizing, it's like, no, but it's funny, what someone famous will make you consider.
Mhm.
So, but Maui was just one big blur. I can't remember much about it. I was 20 by the time I moved away. I moved to San Diego and then I moved to Phoenix. And everywhere I went, it was the same story. My life would degrade to the point where I have to leave and move on because I would make such a big mess out of my life that moving on was always the easiest, best option. So,
What kind of, do you mind sharing like an example? Nothing, it doesn't have to be details, but
yeah, yeah, no,
a relationship, a job,
yeah, all of that, everything. I would get fired from a job and I would have to start and find a new job. And then I would spend money that I shouldn't have spent. So I wouldn't have rent. I'd be a month or two behind on rent. Um, life was just completely unmanageable. I had relationships where I burned a lot of bridges, where I did and said things to people that created nothing but trouble for me. And so I would just get to a place where I'm like, I can't get a job, um, and I don't have any money, and um, I don't have any friends. I'm going to go somewhere else, and I would blame it on.
What was going through your head? Like, was it the world that was the problem, or did you realize that you had the
Yeah,
problem?
yeah, no, that's a good question. I knew there was something wrong. I could see people around me that were getting their life together, and I couldn't figure out, why I couldn't get mine together. I couldn't save money. I couldn't keep an apartment. Couldn't keep a job. Uh, Um, um, and the reason is, I would show up hungover at work and just do a poor job or have a poor attitude, and I would lose jobs. And so I started to slowly feel like there's something wrong with me, and I don't know what that is. And there were many times when I was like that, when I was hitting bottom and things were not good. I would, um, I always had faith. I can never remember a time in my life that I didn't believe in God and that God was with me. Um, and I knew God was going to rescue me somehow, that somehow God was the answer to my problems. And so when I would hit bottom, I would go looking for a church. I would like, I got to get right with God. And so I would go try a church, and I would sit in the back and sit through a worship service, and I would walk away going, well, that's not helpful. I couldn't see how it was useful to me. Um, it didn't seem like it addressed my issues. Never once did I think that I had a drug or alcohol problem. What I thought was is that I had a life problem. I had something wrong with me. I didn't know what it was. I knew that I drank and used drugs too much, but I thought if somehow I could get my life squared away, I would drink and use drugs like normal people. So I
Mm.
felt like it was this other issue, and I couldn't see the connection with my using, and I just I couldn't make that connection. I just thought I don't have a drug problem. I have another problem. I don't know what it is, but if I could fix that, everything else would be fine.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting perspective. In your lifetime, do you see a lot of people not making that connection?
Yeah, I do. I think it's because of this thing called denial. I didn't want it to be drugs and alcohol because that was the thing that worked for me. That was the thing that helped me. And so I think at some level of my being, I didn't want it to be that because I knew if I thought it was that, then the answer would be I'd have to stop. And I
Mm.
just couldn't imagine not drinking or using. I just felt like it was such an important part of my life that I didn't want it to be that.
I think now that you put it in that perspective, I resonate with that. I knew there were problems. I knew that alcohol wasn't solving the problem, but I'm not sure I understood its contribution. Yeah, so maybe I do rest. Yeah.
But
So
that is the nature of the disease. Is one of the first symptoms is denial, and I think we sometimes think denial is knowing we have a problem but refusing to admit it. But I really didn't think I had a problem, and I think denial isn't knowing you have a problem, refusing to admit it. It's really not being able to see the problem. I really couldn't see the problem, um, and that's why it's so important for faith communities and for those that don't have this problem to understand what they're dealing with, because it really takes somebody from the outside to intervene for someone to get well from this problem. Because an alcoholic can't save himself; he's in denial. Um, he can't see it. He needs somebody who can see it to point it out. And that's what intervention's all about. And so if you have
yeah,
loved
and
ones in your life that are using, it's really your mission in life should be to help them. And that's in loving ways, point out that you care about them, but they have a problem.
right.
They hate you for it, but it's what they need.
For me, it's creating an awareness around what the substance or the activity or the behavior is
Yeah.
is costing you. And I think you understand and have a little bit different approach in that in terms of looking at the person. I look at the substance and go, can we just look at what that thing is and what it
Yeah.
does to you? Um, and recognize that as the evil thing as opposed to, because in shame we always go, I'm the problem, I'm the problem.
Right. Right.
And I'm trying, like, we are all based, we are all sinners, 100% of us, not those that just get caught up in alcohol or drugs or, pornography or whatever it is, but all of us. And you're just kind of looking at the outside influences as how they're affecting us to give us strength to go, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, where are we? What do you want to?
Well, you're still progressing and you
Yeah.
haven't admitted that you've got a
Yeah.
problem.
Right. I'd go through these successive moves to San Diego, to Phoenix. I moved back to Washington, and each place I moved from, I just create such a mess that I just think I got to leave here, and I would blame it on. I just say, when I was in Hawaii, it was like 3 years of being in Hawaii. I just went. My problem is Hawaii. I'm a white guy living in Hawaii, and white guys in Hawaii are never going to do well. And so I said it's Hawaii was my problem instead of drugs and alcohol. So I moved, and everywhere I moved, I would blame the place I was at. And I ended up back in my hometown of Bellingham, Washington, which is north of Seattle. And it was there
That's
that I
where my
learned.
son lives, by the way.
Was that right?
Yeah.
You ever get out there?
Yeah, as much as I can in the sun.
It's a great town. I was just there a couple weeks ago. Um, so I was in Bellingham and I was working and I was just dragging along bottom. I was always broke. I was always hungover. I was just always looking for drugs or looking for something to, it was just a big part of my life. And my brother went to treatment, and he got my mom to come and learn about the disease. And between the two of them, they began to gain up on the rest of the family. Um, and they began to confront us about our use. And that was what saved my life, was having somebody who I know cared about me, continue to say to me, I think you have a problem. And I hated hearing that. It really made me mad. I knew I had a problem, but I didn't think it was drugs and alcohol. Um, and it really bothered me. My mom would say, I would say to her, she'd say, how's it going? And I would say, oh, and, life just always had this feeling of, it was just not going well. So I would always have this sort of a complaining attitude. And she would say, well, do you think it could be your drugs? And I would just get so mad. I'd say, Mom, you always think it's that. It's not that. I said, I haven't used drugs.
Ed, I want to stop you for a minute because I understand the denial that you're expressing to her,
Yeah.
but I really question whether or not you deep down knew it was drug.
Oh, I think at some level.
Because some people talk about denial or they don't want to understand. I go, trust me, we all know. There's just no way we want to admit it to another human being. And that's kind of been where I stand. I just wanted to push a little and see if
Yeah,
that.
well, I wanted to scream out for help, but I also knew what that meant. And that meant I would have to give it up. So I didn't want it to be that.
Yeah.
And I really do think up until the day I even went into treatment that I was still thinking it was something else wrong with me.
Yeah.
And it turns out there was a lot wrong with me. Yeah, I have a lot of trauma from my childhood. I have a lot of shame and a lot of wounds, PTSD from my childhood. And I don't know if you're familiar with the ACEs,
Oh,
score.
absolutely.
Well,
100%. Do you want to mention to our listeners what
Yeah.
that is? Yeah.
Yeah. So ACEs is adverse childhood
Experiences.
Thank you. I was going to say events, but I knew that was right. Adverse childhood experiences, and so it's to test yourself on it. You can Google this. and just look under ACEs test, and you get 10 questions. It's really quick and easy to do, but you answer the 10 questions and it'll give you a score. And the 10 questions are, did this happen to you during your childhood? And at the end of it, if you get 4 or more, they can predict with 100% accuracy, if you have 4 or more ACEs, you're going to have some health issue in your adult
That's
life.
mhm.
So it may show up as addiction, which it often does. Um, but it could show up as heart disease. It could show up as any number of things. You will have some health impact from your childhood experiences. It's an incredible diagnostic tool. It's relatively new, but the correlations are phenomenal. It's really a great way to find out if your life is being impacted in a negative way by your childhood experiences. And mine had. I mean, that was why I was using. So when you take the alcohol and drugs away, then I can begin to figure out all these things that are wrong with me, that I can begin to address them through counseling and medication, whatever is needed.
Right.
But I couldn't get at those things as long as I was using and drinking, because it was matched. And I think underneath a lot of addiction is a lot of unresolved pain.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So my brother and my mom began to gang up on me and confront me. And my brother managed to get me to an AA meeting. I thought I was just going for him, but he was getting me there for me. And I remember hearing people talk, and I was really impressed with how these. I mean, when I walked into this room, it was like a scene from the Star Wars bar. There's this some of the most beat up people in the world that you'll ever meet are in these rooms. And and then they go around the room and they start sharing. And what's really phenomenal is how they're able to talk. They're just they're, they were just so honest and authentic and real. And they could laugh at themselves, and they could just talk and be comfortable in their own skin. And I remember thinking, how are they doing that? I was sitting there absolutely terrified that I had to speak out loud in public. And because I had worn so many masks and I was so full of crap, that I was afraid of talking, because I didn't want to be exposed.
Right.
And so I'd been phoning for so long, I didn't even know who I was. These people knew who they were, and they spoke a language that I was so attracted to. I just thought, I want to be able to talk like that. Um, but I did, I couldn't. To save my life, I couldn't. Um, but I remember leaving that first meeting, knowing for sure that I didn't belong there, because I thought, I actually said to God, maybe there's another place where you're not as bad as these people are. Because I thought, that's also the nature of denial. It's like, okay, I've got a problem, but it's not as bad as this. It's,
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, okay, maybe I have a problem, but there's got to be a solution that doesn't involve going to these meetings.
Actually, I felt that way. I
Mhm.
don't belong here.
I think it's pretty common, because you don't want to belong there. I mean, it was like,
Well, that's I think one of the biggest problems, and that's why I think there is denial, because
right.
you're like not there, like, and
Well,
I knew I had a problem, but not that. No, yeah,
nothing, not this. Yes. Well, and I think that's also part of the problem. And that's what I like about the work that you're doing, because there are some people for whom that is the solution. And those are the most severe of alcoholics that need abstinence. They need the 12-step program, and they need that kind of an experience. But there's a whole lot of people that don't fall into that category that still have a drinking problem. Yes.
and can have a drinking problem that gets worse and worse for 10 years. I mean,
Right.
I'm sure I would have ended up there if
Yes.
I didn't stop. It was just
Oh,
getting really bad, and I'm sure I belonged there if I went in and I was honest about where I was. That they
no.
would have said, "Yep, this is the right place for you," but not up here. It wasn't. I had to go through a lot more pain. Yeah,
So
yeah,
you're offering an alternative for those people that just can't bear the idea of having to go that route. So I
right.
really appreciate that.
So what happened after the first meeting then?
So I spent the next year trying to prove to myself that I didn't have that problem, that I didn't belong
Yeah,
there. So I fought with myself, and Um, I I kept trying to control my drinking. I would do great for, several days, and then I would celebrate by going out drinking all night, and then waking up going, "Oh my god, did it again." And then I went
Mhm.
to the doctor and I got some antibiotics, and I thought, I'll take this and that'll keep me from drinking, but I couldn't bring myself to take it. I was afraid to take it 'cause I hate getting sick, and I was afraid that I would drink on it. So I would threaten myself to say, "You better not drink or I'm gonna start using the antibiotics." And, it worked for a little while. I think I stayed sober for about 30 days one time, uh, but it doesn't really count because I did it by taking Percocet every day for 30 days.
Oh, oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
So I
Yeah.
found out ways to medicate. And so I
So
fought about a year, to, convince myself that I wasn't one of those people in those rooms. And, I ended up losing a job, and I drove down to Arizona, not Arizona, but to, Nevada, which the California, Nevada, Lake Tahoe. And a friend of mine was a bartender there, and, I sold, my no, I had $700 in my pocket. That's all I had. And I drove down there and bought some cocaine, and we spent the night trying to sell it. We ended up smoking most of it. And I woke up the next morning and I was in a strange place. Um, I was starting my life over again for the umpteenth time. And I thought, I can't do this anymore.
mhm.
I was just done. I called my mom and I said, I need help. And she said, well, let's get you into treatment. And I said, I don't think that's what I need. And she said, well, let's get you whole and then we'll talk about it. I said, okay. So my mom and my brother went to an Al-Anon meeting and they said, don't rescue him. Don't bring him home. Find him a bed, find him a treatment center and get him in there. And so they called the next day and said, no, we're not going to come and get you. We found a place for you to go. It was a halfway house. And they said, I just got off the phone and I was just devastated because I thought, oh, the last people in the world that would rescue me are not going to rescue me. I was out of options. And I thought, well, I might as well give this a try. And I went into this treatment center and I really still didn't think that this was my problem. They put me in a detox room and I spent 3 days reading the big book and watching Father Martin's Chalk Talks. I don't know if you've ever heard of those.
Yeah.
Well, there's this Catholic priest who talks about alcoholism and what it does. And he talks in front of a chalkboard and draws pictures while he's talking. And he's funny, he's engaging, and he explains things incredibly well. If you ever go to YouTube, you can YouTube look for Father Martin's Chalk Talks, and they're all there. And he's as good today as he ever was.
Oh, that's great.
Well, anyway, that impacted me because I thought, wow, priest, he's wearing his collar, and I just thought that was very amazing. But during those 3 days of reading the big book and watching Chalk Talks, I went, "Oh my gosh, this explains it. This explains everything. I have this problem." And and it was I felt hope for the first time in a long time because I thought, "This is my problem and this is a solution. I have a solution." And so I started the slow, very painful process of recovering and getting my life back. And for me, that was going to a lot of 12-step meetings, not drinking, not using. And, um,
And let me ask you, because it sounds like we finally got to this place where we understand that alcohol and drugs were problems, but there were underlying things also that you had to address. Did you do that at the same time?
Well, part of what happens is working through the 12 steps is, some of that gets addressed. But
Okay.
for most of us, if you work through the 12 steps, the first 3 steps are about God and they're about surrendering and trust. And so you learn to surrender and trust God. And then steps 4, 5, and 6 are about cleaning up, or self-examination. And, um, you spend time reflecting on your life and writing down everything you can think of why you have, um, moral problems. So what happens when you start drinking and using drugs is that when you drink and use drugs, you end up saying and doing things that you don't personally uh, approve of. But then you wake up and you realize what you did, and then you have to justify it to yourself. And then over time, you just kind of progress. You get worse and worse about doing and saying and thinking things that are not things that you approve of. So you get way away from your moral compass,
Right.
and
For sure.
you become a person that you were never meant to be. And so those steps try to help you sort out, what you're, and they really are about forgiveness too, because when you have to share your moral inventory with another human being, it's incredibly healing. And so, what happens is that you open up with somebody for the first time in your life about all the things you've done wrong, and you want to make them right. And when you work those steps, it cleans you up. It really does. I mean, it does. You don't get everything, but it's hugely healing. And then the next steps are removing those defects of character, but then it's making amends for the past because,
Right.
because you also do things that you need to make up for. Uh, when we do bad things in this world, they stay with us. There was a TV ad one time that said it was a sales pitch for a murder show, and it said sometimes not getting caught or committing a crime it can be worse than getting caught, and
Oh, yeah.
that stuff just resides in you, unless you get it out and deal with it. You can't be free. And so you have to go through the process of making a list of all the people you had harmed and going and making direct amends to those people. And so you have to, Jesus once said, before you bring your gift to the altar and you realize somebody has something against you, go and make that right first before you make your gift. And what I believe that means is that your gift is no good as long as you have if you have a problem with somebody else that's unresolved, your relationship with God is unresolved. And so there's a direct correlation between our relationship with other people and our relationship with God. And so we have to make amends with people. We have to clean up the past. Otherwise, uh, there's just a wound in our soul that will never heal until we do that hard work. And then the rest of the steps are about deepening our relationship with God, continuing that inventory of self-assessment, deepening our relationship with God, and then helping others. So really for me, the 12 steps is the litany of the Christian life. I think these are all biblical principles that are about how God really wants us to live our lives. And so the steps just sort of break it down into practical ways of doing that dance.
So there's not always the ability to track down somebody that we may have hurt or
Yeah.
harmed, but Jesus still takes care of that. I mean, how do you guys address that in the 12
Yeah.
step?
There's like if somebody's deceased and I've done this before is somebody who has passed away that I hurt and did something wrong to, I write them a letter. And I go with another human being and I go to their gravesite or go over to an appropriate place and I read it out loud and then burn it. Uh, There were financial amends I needed to make. I owed my brother some money. I owed the bank some money, and I didn't have the money, but I owed it. And so I took a part-time job to get the money to pay these people back. That was one of the most profoundly freeing experiences of my life was paying back those debts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
important that we clean up the past.
Well, it makes you realize there's steps that make you realize you can clean up.
Yeah,
I think that's important. That
yeah,
understanding that you are not doomed because of your past, that there's no, it's, it's too late formula. There is
right,
no, it's too late. Right.
right, and it's never too late. There's a way to do it.
So at some point, yeah, we could spend a lot of time on this great story, but at some point you decide that you want to be a pastor. So tell me about.
Yeah, well, so part of the process of getting my life back was to, go back to school. I went back to school because I didn't want to do what I was qualified to do, and that was work in the hospitality industry. Hope the
By
rest
the way, how old were you at this point?
was in my late 20s,
Okay.
27 when I was 27 when I first got into recovery. And then I was probably 29 when I started back to college. I went to a community college to get my grades up so I could get into a real school and then transferred to the University of Washington, Western Washington University. Got a degree in journalism and I was working for a newspaper and just knew I wasn't going to be happy doing that. And I decided to go to seminary um, to study God. I wanted to study God. I wanted to know the Bible really well. And I wanted to deepen my spirituality. But I didn't want to be a pastor. I thought that wasn't an option for me. I thought I burned too many bridges for that. I thought that was just wasn't an option. And I applied to seminary and I told them all of that. I said, I don't think I'm a pastor, but I'd like to study God. And they said, well, that's what we do here. So why don't you come and do that and worry about whether you can be a pastor later? And they said, okay, that sounds good to me. So I went off to seminary and studied, Greek and theology and metaphysics and all that fun stuff. And slowly but surely, I began to realize that, um, you know, I, I really realized what grace was all about because Lutherans really push this thing called grace. I mean, that's the hill they die on. It's all grace. And so it occurred to me one day that uh, I was forgiven and loved by God completely. I think I was still holding my sins against me, in my past.
Oh, absolutely. That, yeah,
So
that's really the mountain to climb, isn't it?
it's, and I realized that God had loved me just as much when I was out there carousing and using. And I was just as loved. I was just as saved then. Not that God was pleased with my actions, but I couldn't have been loved more than I was now trying to be a good person going to seminary. And I realized that, yeah, I could be a pastor because I can talk about this.
Mm.
And, and my
You could be a
church,
good pastor because you can talk about
and
this.
that's
Yeah.
what my church told me. I mean, that's what I was so that's where I really experienced grace was like, no, it's because you've been through all that that you make a great pastor. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Anyway, I was just, that was incredibly heartwarming and life giving. So,
Congratulations. And I'm sure you've changed many, many lives as a result. 28 years you've been a pastor?
being here as a pastor,
Wow.
well, in my first year of seminary, I heard about this group of pastors getting together in Chicago, and they were alcoholics. And I thought, I want to go and I want to go there. And so I drove to Chicago, and they were gathering for the first time from around the country, and they were pastors that were recovering alcoholics. And they formed a group called the Fellowship of Recovering Lutheran Clergy, and their mission was to help other clergy in recovery.
It's
And so
awesome.
I jumped into that group and got involved and have been a member since their inception in 1990. And uh, 18 years ago, became the executive director of the fellowship and have been the director ever since. And it was that group that gave birth to this group, the Fellowship Recovering Lutheran Clergy.
That
Oh,
makes perfect sense. And that seems like the right progression, right?
yeah,
And what are you trying to do today with the Center of
yeah.
Addiction? Okay. What is the goal?
Well, so um, the Fellowship Recovering Lutheran Clergy was at a point where we are saying, what else can we be doing around addiction? And what we thought we would do is form a fellowship for other Lutherans that weren't clergy. We thought there's got to be a lot of Lutherans that are in recovery. Let's form a fellowship for them. And as we were thinking about doing that, I attended a gathering at the University of Minnesota, and it was all the state leaders. The governor was there. Amy Klobuchar, the senator, was there, and they had all these state senators there, and they were all talking about the opioid crisis, and they were saying it's out of control. We're doing everything we can to solve it, but everything we're doing is making the problem worse. And we need everybody to realize this is everybody's problem, and we need everyone to step up. And when I heard that, I had an epiphany that I thought, there's a church on every corner of every city, every town in this country. And if every one of them would start to do a little something, we could really start to make a difference. If they would just put out a brochure, saying we care about addiction, and so I just went back to the FRLC, the Fellowship of Recovering Losing Clergy, and I said, we don't need to gather recovering people because they're going to their meetings, they're doing fine. What we need to do is educate church leaders because they're ignorant. They don't get any education around this. I went to seminary. I know how little they cover it. We have spiritual leaders out there who do not understand the addictive process. And I don't know how, quite frankly, how you can be a spiritual leader and not understand how addiction works in the human psyche.
Well, and this is where you and I are so aligned because I was somebody who was a leader in the church and I loved Jesus and I read the Bible and I tried to figure this out and I'm like, what's wrong? Why can't I stop? It's supposed to be okay. You listen to all these sermons and all these things are supposed to happen when you trust and follow and love Jesus. But it wasn't happening. And and I had to go to a secular program to figure it out. And then I recognized all of God's word embedded in it. And that's why the devotional came up of like, wait, I'm saying the same thing. Like the church isn't understanding all of the processes and steps and guidance that God has given us to deal with this. And I wanted to just formulate something that came directly out of God's word. So I loved your heart for we need to let the churches, help them understand how to solve this because
isn't that amazing? It's a spiritual problem and we send people off to secular places to get well.
It is. It's a spiritual battle. That's exactly what it is. And, 81% of people go to church to feel more connected to God. And I'm convinced they want to feel more connected to God because they've done something that makes them feel disconnected. And so if we go back to the beginning of our conversation, why are they feeling disconnected? Because there's probably some form of habitual sin that's involved in their life. So you see how it's like circular, and it's not that the church doesn't care. They care a lot, but what's the formula, right? What's the formula?
In a way, the church kind of enables people to stay in their addictions. It just, they say you're loved by God, you're forgiven, and go and serve the Lord. And people go right back to what they were doing with no way to change.
Well, and that's what I think created so much shame for me and an inability to talk openly about it. Because if I'm following God's word and I'm in his word, which I was, and I was teaching it, like, why do I still have this problem? And it's just, the problem must be me. Maybe I don't love him enough. Maybe I'm,
right.
You know what I mean? And so that's the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is just being able to turn around and repent. But when addiction's involved, it's difficult to turn around without tools. And it turns into shame, which is I must be the problem. And that's a bad place to be, right? And it's impossible. Yeah. So
I'm unworthy. I'm unworthy. For some reason, God must not love me.
Yeah, I don't know that I thought that, but I thought something's wrong. I did think something was wrong with me? Like, what's wrong with me? I thought that I was the only one um suffering like this.
Yes,
but
yes.
but now that I'm a coach, I get all of us are suffering. And I don't, and I'm trying to scream it from the roof, like, it's okay. You are not alone in
That's
this.
the That's the gifts that your recovery has for the church. I mean, because I believe there's recovering people. I know, in fact, there are recovering people attending these churches, but they're doing so um, secretly. They don't tell anybody about their recovery. And what they have, I earlier I talked about going to that meeting, being amazed by the way these people were able to talk.
Mhm.
They spoke a language, and the language was humility, and it was authenticity and genuineness. That's the gift that recovering people have to give to the church, is that language, because that doesn't get spoken in church. Humility, authenticity, and genuineness is not the language of the church, and that's the gift that recovering people have to bring.
Man, this is exactly, yeah. Um, and I think some of the more successful pastors are ones who admit their personal struggles. And so it becomes real, right? As opposed to standing on a stage and saying, it's just all about Jesus. Everything's okay when you accept Jesus. Yeah, it's I mean, and I don't want to take it away, because I do hear about the magic that happens for some, like, oh my gosh, I accepted Jesus and I never wanted another cigarette, or I never
Right,
used
right,
drugs
right.
again. And praise God, that's what's not me.
I
You know
know,
what?
I know. I hated that. I hated that because that's what I wanted. I mean, in fact, when I went to that first AA meeting, I remember thinking, I don't need this because God is going to save.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, well, Ed, we are running out of time, and I
Oh,
just want, I know time just has flown with
yeah.
our conversation, but this is about say goodbye. And so you have this platform to tell people one thing that you wish they could understand, so that they can step into um, this place of hope as opposed to despair. What advice can you give people that are just looking for something that they can hear, that, you know, something that just became possible that was impossible in your mind at the time?
Well, the if you read in the scriptures, the encounters that Jesus has, the people that he meets and heals along the way, almost always are people who have become so desperate that they're willing to try anything. And there's something about that desperation that prepares us for the change that God has for our hearts. And I think Janis Joplin said, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. When you have nothing left to lose, when you're
Yeah.
sort of to the end of your rope, there is there is someone there to catch you. So God is there, and I wish there was some magic words I could say to help people, arrive at that transformative moment. But I know that no matter where you are in your struggles, um, God is going to be there for you. In fact, especially in your struggles.
Oh, especially. That's where you feel him most.
You-
Um, but can you speak to the biggest lie that you believed when you were using substances? You look back and you're like, how could I think that? What
Oh,
can
God.
you, because I want people to understand that their brain is not operating on all pistons, that there is this massive lie that is being fed to them and believed. And what do you think is the biggest lie that you believed while you were under the influence, or while you were using it?
Yeah. Well, this was huge for me. And that was, it was in the process of recovery. I had a sponsor who I was talking with one day, and he said, and he knew I was a pretty religious person, that I was pretty outspoken about my faith. And so he just said, well, tell me about God. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, describe God to me. And I was kind of thrown by that because it's not often you articulate, what you believe about God. And I kind of struggled with it. And then I began to kind of say some things that I believed about God. And he listened to me for a while and he said, I don't think that's God. And I went, what? What
Mm.
are you talking about? And he said, I don't think that's God. He said, it sounds a lot like your dad. And I was just like, "What?"
Uh,
No, it was a wow. It was a very big wow. And I just went, oh my God, it is my dad. And I had my eyes open and I went, I believe in a false God. Um, when you think about how do we get our images of God? Well, we create them from our experiences and from what we're taught. And so we project that onto what we think God is. And whatever we think God is going to be less than what God is because we can't imagine
mhm.
it, right? And it's really typical for us to use a parent as a model for God. And I picked my father, who was very broken and who was a cross between Santa Claus and Genghis Khan. And that's what I had as an image of God, was this God who was nice if I was good, but if I was mean, I would get the belt. Or if I was bad, I would get the belt.
Oh,
And
thank you. Thank you. This is just such a big deal. Thank you for sharing that because you and I both try and witness to other people, and a lot of people go, nope, don't want anything to do with that guy. But that is very, very wise because we need to wipe the slate clean about what is possible. And this God that loves us so much, like you said, loved you as just so much during your times of struggling. And that is super profound about re- reassessing who you think he is. And I think the only way to understand who he truly is by personal experience and being in his word. Will you
yeah,
agree with that?
yes, and I think challenging your preconceived ideas because those are hard to let go of. I mean, once we get an idea about who God is, we codify it and we make it, it becomes sacred. And so you don't want to mess with that. But it was a lie. It was a big fat lie, and I was believing it, and it was keeping me from knowing a much bigger God, a much bigger God.
Amen. Amen. Oh, Ed, that's just wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
being here, for sharing your story, and for sharing all the amazing things that you are trying to do through the Center of Addiction and Faith. And I'm a big fan. How can people get in touch with you, support
Yeah,
you through this?
addictionandfaith.com is our website. We have a conference coming up in October 5th through 7th, and that is life changing for people. I can't even count the people who've come to that and just said, wow, that was amazing. And every conference that happens, people come and just have all kinds of lights go off. Um, and there's something powerful about being with people talking about this topic in the church. Um, People walk around going, wow, we're finally having this conversation. Powerful. Anyway,
Well, good. And we will get some stuff in the show notes about that conference as well. So thank you again. Ed. It's been super enlightening.
bless your work. Thank you.
Thanks.